Excellent. Well, thank you. And obviously, we've been part of the Angel Beats sessions and seminars for the past 5 or 6 sessions, and truly have enjoyed sponsoring and speaking with the attendees both on and offline. So thank you very much. What we're going to cover today has a little bit to do with some of the content that we've spoken about in the past, but specifically is going to talk about two different pieces, and that is the configuration and then the yang to that, or the 180 of that, of the misconfigurations as it relates to how and when you're configuring a cloud. The good news is, especially within AWS, there's a ton of resources available for you to be able to properly configure, or at least start the setup of the foundation of your cloud infrastructure, so that it is, on a solid foundation. The I guess not so good news, or the some of the more challenging news is, when you have lots of different people, lots of different teams, and lots of different resources that are in charge of your cloud configuration, it tends to be prone to have, I'll say, the word is misconfigurations, but I'll say human error or issues that are relied or that are tied to the way in which the infrastructure is deployed. So let's get in and talk about it. Now, as I mentioned before, these first few slides you might have seen, and it's not because I'm trying to be efficient and reuse my slides. It's simply because these first three things are so true. When you're building in the cloud environment, when you're migrating to a cloud, wherever you are in your digital transformation journey, what tends to happen is there's a lack of visibility and there's a low degree of automation that's tied to it. There's a very manual effort that's involved in lift and shifts. There are consultants that come in, there are AWS consultants, big four consultancy firms, private boutique cloud-related consultancy firms that come in and are helpful in doing this. And I'm not saying that they're not valuable at all. They're very, very valuable. But regardless, there's a low degree of automation and a high lack of visibility. And what that leads to is an inability to stay secure and move fast. But what you want to do is stay secure and move quickly, and move fast. And so what's beautiful, and I love following up Kieran and the rest of the AWS team, is because these platforms have given you a guideline. And the guideline is well-defined, and it is easily documented, and it's good to follow. And even within the AWS platform, you're able to align to this as part of a framework that they have from a tool perspective. And so it gives you that solid foundation, that first step to go off on. And we'll come back to this in particular, because I wanted to just start out with the strong foundation that one should build upon when they are considering a migration to the cloud via AWS. But we'll come back to this in particular. We're going to take a step back and talk about why something like this is needed, and what the reasons are behind, kind of how things were embedded. And you're all familiar with this, right? You used to rack and stack servers, plug them all in, set them all up, provision them, purchase them from HP or Dell, get the RAM, get the CPUs, install the OS, harden the server, install the middleware, install the database layer, install the application layer, and go through the 7 layers of the Open Systems Interface model, right? OSI model. The new way is much different, right? You're doing all of the steps that were involved here with a matter of a click of a mouse. And you're clicking, boom, done, deploy. And you've taken that 6 to 9 week process and you've made it 6 to 9 seconds or 6 to 9 minutes, right? And that's fantastic. But remember what I said in the second slide, move fast and stay secure, right? So here you're moving fast and moving quickly, but the same resources that the app developer, the DevOps person that's doing the deployment of the database, the S3, let's say RDS, S3, the EC2 compute, that was 3 different teams before. It might have been 5 different teams before. It might have been 7 different resources that were doing all that before. Now you've got one DevOps person and one cloud architect that's doing all that. And you cannot be, a jack of all trades because you end up being an ace of none, right? And so there's a reason that there are experts in database, RDS, in, when we're talking about data lakes with S3 storage with Kieran, there's a reason that there are experts in just that environment. And so when you're building out a cloud infrastructure, what commonly happens is mistakes, right, or misconfigurations that are part of this, with not necessarily malintent or even ignorance, but rather just an inability to understand or properly configure the environment in such a way that it meets with the best practices or standards that are tied to security or compliance. This slide has nothing to do with the presentation. I just thought it was really cool that somebody put cloud infrastructure in containers. And if you're familiar with containers, Kubernetes, Dockers, those sorts of things, I just thought it was really, as I was doing research for this, I just thought it was really cool that somebody put their cloud environment in an actual container, just to be totally meta. So hopefully that brought a smile to your face. But back to the content at hand, as it relates to the infrastructure that you're building, right? You've got a ton of different pieces or domains to take care of. You've got the network component, you've got resource constraints, you've got growth, expansion, contractions. We have several customers that do this, that spin up environments during the workday and spin them down to 50% their capacity, Friday at 8 p.m. and run them at low capacity over the weekends. Some of them do the exact opposite. They're retailers. They have a low capacity of environment during the work week, and then at 5 p.m. they spin up their environment, and on the weekends they spin up their environment even more, and then Monday morning they spin them back down, right? So there's this elasticity that comes with the environments that they're building. And you have to properly measure and make it effective, right? And so there are a couple of different models in which this is deployed. It could be software as a service, it could be infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, depending on how you're doing things. And as Ron just spoke about, there was a financial services customers who had COBOL applications on a mainframe. That's going to be some sort of hybrid solution, right? So the reality is you're going to take some sort of component of this to build out the infrastructure that you're doing. And as I said, that likely, and true to form, we have tens of thousands of customers globally. And true to form, when we speak to our customers, a majority of the time it is a hybrid solution that we're dealing with. It's less of the time that we have somebody that's all public cloud, all private cloud. The reality is it's normally somewhere in between as things go, right? So when you have legacy applications, when you have organizations that are in the midst of their digital transformation, or organizations that are just starting their digital transformation, it's important to do the things to get the foundational steps right as you're building this out, to have a high degree, to have automation, visibility, and to make your build out or your environment more secure. So what are the best practices areas that are recommended by AWS for the way that you want to do security in the cloud? So remember I said that there's the well-architected framework. One of the pillars of the well-architected framework is a security pillar. And of that pillar, there are subdomains. So here we have some subdomains that relate to identity access management, detection of incidents, infrastructure protection. You can read all this, right? And each of these has their own little domain or explanation between everything. But the point behind this is there needs to be this sort of managed security component that's tied to the infrastructure that you're building. Now, AWS does a fantastic job of starting you off on this journey, but as Ron mentioned, there are vendors, obviously I'm one of them, that provide platforms that will help you get much, much more in-depth, much, much more visibility, and much, much more coverage and automation that's tied to something like this. But the point is, before you're going in and doing your transformation, be certain to align to these sorts of best practices that are tied to the pillars that are already there. And so you can see with the well-architected framework, there are 5 pillars. Each of these pillars has a sub-point or subdomain to them, and you can scan the QR code up here. This presentation, Ron has a copy. You'll be able to grab this, no problem. But the point behind this is, here we have a blueprint from your cloud provider who's seen millions, if not tens of millions of implementations that are very similar to what you'll be building. I'm not saying they're exact to what you'll be building, but a large percentage of what you will be building is similar to what somebody else has built in the past. AWS has been around since 2006. We're pushing 14 years. They've seen every implementation, or almost every implementation, and they know what the best practices are for you to follow. So you should align to something. You must. Actually, I'm not even going to say should. I'm going to say must. I used to be an auditor, and Imad is on the phone, is on this presentation here, and he and I used to do audits together. you must actually align to a best practice framework that's here, because if you don't, you're setting yourself up for headaches down the road. We also mentioned, it's funny how all the things that we do in these presentations kind of line up really, really well, and it's not purposeful. It just points to the fact that we're kind of all dealing with the same problems, and our customers are all seeing the same sort of issues. But we also mentioned, cataloging your applications, right? Ron had asked the survey questions about app databases or CMDBs or those sorts of things, right? It's important to catalog what you're working on to have that visibility. And good news, again, AWS here able to provide you with the service catalog. They do charge you for this, so be certain that you're understanding how the charge structure is defined here, but give you the capacity to create your own sort of kind of CMDB. Right, most places, most organizations, or most of our customers kind of call this application catalog their CMDB for where they tie and build together the applications. So let's go back and talk about staying fast, being secure, having visibility, using automation to do that. When you start to align yourself to the various pillars that are available to you, you're able to start. I actually won't even say start. You're able to consistently have the visibility that's needed to maintain certain service needs or service delivery objectives that your organization has. So you might have a contractual obligation to your customers or to your vendors or your third parties that you have to be up for a certain amount of time, right? There's this principle of 5 nines. Well, how do you do that? Well, you align to the well-architected reliability framework. Well, how do you do it and maintain the compliance need? Well, you align to the well-architected framework's security pillar, right? And so when you build kind of all this out, you start to get the patterns in place for how you're going to be building your applications. And if you think about the way that you're building your applications and building your workloads and migrating those application and workloads to the cloud, you see these patterns emerge of your pipeline for development. The way in which your developers develop, promote, and build code starts to become consistent, right? And you start to use the same processes time after time again, and you start to standardize on the best practices. And then you start to mature to something like software-defined infrastructure, infrastructure as code, these sorts of components, so that you can literally, kind of make this factory of the way that you build your cloud applications and the way that you build your environment out. And it utilizes the various services that are already well available to you in the practice of building out your cloud footprint within AWS. Well, the same sort of thing starts to happen with security components. So you can go through and get I'll say mapping, not necessarily visual, but a mapping, right, of how the code or how the environment needs to be built from a security standpoint, so that you can build the compliance and security into the overall methodology that you are building your DevOps in. This is sometimes called DevSec, S-E-C, DevSecOps, right? You're building security and you're weaving it into kind of that infinite pipeline that is available as part of the way that you build out your cloud environment. Fantastic news is that the services that are available for you to weave this in are readily available for you with the various components of the well-architected framework tied back to the actual security, tied back to the actual services that can be utilized for security. So here you have everything from SSO to inspector to config, CloudTrail logs, firewall managers, Macie, Macie2, all these services that are available for you. If you're not familiar with what they are, reach out to your AWS resource, reach out to, Trend Micro or whomever you have as your partner, and they'll obviously help you to kind of build and create your services based on your mapping to the way that you're building out your environment based on the security services that are available to you. So you configure it, right? You configure it in an automated pattern. You configure it in such a way that you can go and build out your environment to be totally visible and completely in line with the best practices of the way that your organization has deemed efficient and secure for you to do things. Remember, I said fast, secure, visibility, and automation, right? So once you're able to do this, and this is an actual scan of one of the test environments that one of my engineers utilizes, but the point is you can either do this via command line interface, you can do this via your console. The point is you can even go to the point where you're using infrastructure as code to sort of build this out. And when you start to do that, that's really when you get to the point where your organization is truly becoming mature, having fast, secure, visible, and a more automated environment of doing things. So it's important to understand that the steps are there. The mapping is there for you to be able to follow and build this out appropriately for the path that you have to or are trying to achieve. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about your responsibility. And so if you look at, so think back to my slide, 10 slides ago, where I talked about the old way of doing things, where you were responsible, you had multiple teams that were plugging in your environment, going through the OSI model. Obviously that's changed, right? And so there's a responsibility that AWS has, and there's a responsibility that you have from how to protect and how to build your environment. Gartner in April released a report that said 99% of misconfigurations will be the customer's fault. That's no surprise. That number should not be a surprise to you. Like I said, AWS has done tens of millions of implementations. They know what they're doing, and they're going to configure their environment in the most secure and correct possible manner. It's your responsibility, and it's your team that will likely do the misconfigurations. The NSA released a report in January that said that the #1 breach for 2020 and sort of beyond will be misconfigurations in the cloud, right? So there's no secret here. The way in which you develop and deploy your environment in the cloud, kind of everything above the line of everything that's not in orange, everything that's in dark blue, is your responsibility, and it's something that you have to take care of and do really, really well. Good news for you. As you're going through and doing the configuration of this, right, you have partners such as Trend Micro, you have partners such as the other ones that are going to be part of this demonstration to help you build and configure this in a quick, visible, automated fashion, right? And so one of our most, I'll say, robust platforms that's been launched is what's called Cloud One. What Cloud One does is it gives you complete visibility into your cloud environment, everything from workloads to containers to network to configurations and the way in which you configure your environment. So this product that's here is Cloud One Conformity, and what it does is it goes and showcases in real time, right, in a matter of microseconds, if you've misconfigured your environment. So maybe you're building out an environment, you're clicking, next. You build out that environment and you forgot to encrypt your S3 bucket, or you over provision the environment and it's just using too many compute instances, or you've got identity and access management all hosed up and it's just not well taken care of. Conformity here will be actively scanning that environment and telling you, what's happening and how and what needs to be taken care of. And in November of last year, we actually did a report that was calling out the security trends of 2020, or security predictions of 2020. And the #3 bullet point there that you see here is misconfigurations in the cloud will compound risk. This backs up what Gartner said. This backs up what the NSA said. So it's nice when vendor, the three-letter agency and kind of Gartner are all saying the same things, right? You've really got to pay attention to the configurations. And it's no secret that AWS is going to continually release more and more services and more features and functionalities that are available for you. And you're going to have to be adaptive, and your organization is going to have to roll with these and try to bring them in. If somebody's going to try to work with machine learning, automated intelligence, or artificial intelligence, these services are available out there. Does your organization have the resources and capacity to monitor, to maintain, to build, to configure these correctly? And who knows what other services are going to be announced, with reInvent coming up, right? Just more and more complexity that's coming as part of this. But the good news is we tend to screw up the same things all the time. We tend to screw up identity access management. We tend to screw up encryption. We tend to screw up logging, right? And so we'll go through, and we've seen this, and we see this thousands and thousands of times, just commonly, the same, 5 to 10 things that are just consistently done. It's why there's an OWASP top 10, right? And the top 10 has barely changed since 2013, because we're misconfiguring the same sort of things over and over again. And nobody's, giving us a break, right? New regulations, new fines that are coming in as part of this, just time and time and time again. And so regardless of where you are in your cloud journey, whether you're just beginning it over on the left here, or whether you're a true, born in the cloud native disruptor over on the right here, odds are you've got hybrid business units that are marketing might be a little bit more cloud forward, and IT and IS might be a little bit cloud reticent or cloud curious. But regardless of where you are, you have to have this level of understanding in the way in which you're going to be building your environment out, and planning in the way in which you're going to be building your environment out, because your third parties, the people you do business with, and your customers are already in the cloud or already considering the same sort of migration. So you have to keep up with them and do that really, really well. And so time and time again, right, we have the same 5, misconfigurations, but what do we see when somebody's doing that cloud migration? Well, we see compliance issues. We see huge environmental drift, right? Somebody that went from sandbox to staging to dev to prod, and just huge changes between them with new parties and new teams that have been involved in every step along the way. We see complete lack of visibility, and we see, regulated workloads that are something that needs to truly be understood before migration to utilize the services, right? And so again, right, this burgeoning field of cloud security posture management or cloud posture management comes to where we have to get involved and understand what's happening with the issues that are being introduced early in a build cycle to cause some sort of issues in the production launch, right? So when you mess up something over on the front side, as you get to customer facing, you're going to have container issue, you're going to have storage issue, you're going to have encryption issues. You're just going to have an incapable amount of visibility into the amount of issues that you'll have because of the speed in which your cloud environment is being developed, right? And so you're doing this with software-defined infrastructure, you're doing this with agile methodologies, you're doing this with multiple releases a day, a week, a month, however you do it. So you need to be certain to weave in and have that central visibility that is part of your DevOps cycle, and that's what Cloud One, specifically Cloud One Conformity, does for you, right? It aligns to the well-architected framework pillar by pillar and allows you to see what's happening from a security standpoint, from a performance standpoint, from an operational excellence standpoint, and give you the configuration that's tied to each of those in real time with complete visibility across multiple compliance frameworks and standards, so that we can take care of, heal, and really remediate anything that's happening in your environment, so that it is truly a fast, agile, completely visible, secure, all of those pieces as you're going through and doing that. And that's why and how, I guess, Trend Micro's Cloud One fits very, 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 very well into what's being done. So, regardless of how you're trying to achieve, the SEC, the SEC, the security in DevSecOps, you need to do and follow some best practices to truly sort of weave it in. So when you're doing your DevOps lifecycle development, you've got that component in there, and Trend Micro will gladly go through and be the one to show you, how and how and why we do this for you anytime.